Welcome to the Maine First podcast. My name is James Mosier, and joining me are Representative Larry Lockman, the Honorable Heather Siraki, and Zach Gelpy. During today's podcast, we will be addressing illegal immigration and its effect on the state of Maine. We will talk about why it's happening, who the players are, and the fact that the issue is far greater than the discourse from both sides of the political spectrum.
We have a situation, according to the statistics today. In Portland, 65 to 70% of 1,000 people now receiving general assistance are non-citizens. Everyone hear that? 65 to 70% of the people receiving government assistance are non-citizens. Another, the city budgets of about $200,000 annually to fill in gaps for asylum seekers who don't qualify for general assistance, such as those who haven't yet filed an application. So you haven't filed, and they're reaching out to give you money in Portland. This is the Democrat Party, though. This is a state that is now with Democrat control. Democrat, right, is a state legislature.
That's correct.
Still run by Democrats.
There'll be all kinds of comments on what's going on in Portland. Portland can do what they want to do. Portland is a city. The voters and the citizens of Portland can do precisely what they intend to do. However, when it becomes a state problem and other people get involved, how do you transfer that responsibility to other cities and towns in Maine?
Well, I think everybody needs to step up. And the first day we started hearing about this, I immediately called the mayor of South Portland. I called the mayor of Westbrook, and they recognize this is an opportunity, and that's what's most important to remember. Folks who are here, look at every family I talked to last night, and certainly I didn't talk to all of them, but said we can't wait to get stable and get a job and start working, and we're so grateful for being here. I think any mayor who walked through that crowd would say, wow, what do I have to do to be able to bring these people into my community? Because we need young, highly skilled families, people who were, skills from engineers to truck drivers, from seamstresses to chefs. I mean, these are folks who were just living their lives in this country, and the persecution has just it's run so deep at this point that every level of individual is running. But it's a state opportunity. I think the governor recognizes that. That's why she's coming down, wants to see what she can do to help. So it's not just the city of Portland, and I'm very proud of the fact that other communities are stepping in as well.
I'll use the term pushback. Have you received any pushback, any concerns from anyone within the borders of, again, Maine's largest city, Portland, that says, look, I'm uncomfortable with this and I don't know where the money is going to come from?
Well, have I gotten, yes. I mean, I certainly get lots of nasty emails from folks who I won't give a lot of credibility to, but some really unfortunate racism and bigotry comes out. That part of this always happens.
Chaos continues on the southern border, and we had a visitor a couple months ago to the studio, Jason Owens. He's the chief patrol agent for the Holton sector in Maine. That's just basically Maine. Holton is way up there, but it's Maine is what it is. And he's with the Border Patrol, and so he was in the area, so we invited him to come back. And of course, you know that the problem continues to get worse and worse on the southern border. And now there are no such things as border states anymore. Every state has a problem, but it's getting worse up here because now word of mouth is getting around the world, and so Africans are coming in to the country and claiming asylum And so they have to be let go under the court rulings that President Trump keeps complaining about, and the Democrats welcome because they think it's going to increase the voting base and the dependency base in the country. And so many of the Africans in particular are demanding that they be sent up here to New England. Now, why do we think that they want to come to New England? Chief Border Patrol Agent Owens. Why are they demanding to be brought to New England?
Well, so first and foremost, that's a key point. They choose where they go to. So when they are caught by the Border Patrol and they are ultimately released, they have a location in mind, and they tell that to the agents that are processing them, and then they basically go there and they're assigned that particular court district to show up for the court hearing. And so by word of mouth, so in Portland, Maine, for example, there are already some communities from Democratic Republic of Congo and Angola in particular, and so word of mouth has spread that it's a good place to live and that they're being treated well, and so it's attracting more people. And most recently, we had
what does being treated well mean?
Well, they're being welcomed in, and there are programs that the community pays for to make sure that they're
welfare
taken care of.
Programs.
And so they have the expo, for example, set aside.
Yeah, the expo is the big hall, the big convention hall. I mean, where are they going to? They have a basketball team or multiple basketball teams. Where are they going to play in the fall if all these Africans are living there now?
Well, so what I had heard so far is that they've had some 200 beds and are capable of going up to 350 or 400 if needs be to accommodate these folks. And of course the question becomes, for how long? How long is it going to take for that process for them to get their date before the immigration judge and get their court or their asylum case adjudicated? So it could.
I thought they were building a new homeless shelter in the downtown region. I mean, I know this area because I was born there. Oh, I thought this homeless shelter was for Americans. But apparently now there's going to be some new African immigrants that are going to be living there.
Well, the ones that crossed in Del Rio sector, they chose to come up to Portland, Maine. They actually entered the country illegally, and that's a very important distinction to make.
Representative Lockman, you've attempted a number of times now over the past 3 years to introduce legislation that would at least bring Maine up to federal immigration standards. But Maine Democrats have flatly refused to consider the problem. In 2016, Speaker Sarah Gideon, then the Assistant Majority Leader, went as far as to effectively label you a racist when in a column for the Press Herald, she addressed the bill that you were introducing at the time as she said there's no place for blatantly racist Trump-like maneuvers here in Maine. According to the Federation of American Immigration Reform, there are roughly 5,000 illegals residing in the state at a cost of more than $40 million a year. You're in your fourth term in the Maine House. Why do you think there are legislators here in Maine like Gideon who refuse to slam the door shut on illegals? Why is there a relative lack of concern from legislators on both sides of the aisle?
The basic reason that Gideon and her cohorts are throwing the doors open is because they need the new voters. Just like at the national level, the left knows they can't win elections unless they've got a new stream of dependable voters who feel indebted to the Democratic Party. So I think it's a pretty simple equation that they need these. They eventually see these people as voters. They're going to move to give them the vote. That's part of the Maine People's Alliance agenda is voting rights for non-citizens. So that's the short answer.
All right. Why is there a relative lack of concern for legislators on both sides of the aisle? Why does it appear like nobody gives a hoot?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that it's fair to say nobody gives a hoot, but yeah, there's not near as much concern as there should be. Republican side of the aisle, the problem is. Well, to put it bluntly, the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, they're all in for open borders and more asylum seekers. They're advocating for amnesty for DACA recipients just recently, even though we know the latest reports are that 10% of those DACA recipients have arrest records, 10% of them. We knew they weren't all valedictorians, but I didn't suspect that the numbers would be that high, that 1 out of 10 actually has an arrest record. So the simple answer is that the corporate country club cheap labor Republicans, they're okay with unbridled immigration because the cheap labor drives down wages, and particularly among minorities who are already here. I mean, the people who get hurt the worst by open borders are, frankly, the black and Hispanic communities in the United States. Those entry-level jobs, the entry-level wages are being driven down when you got this huge pool of people who will work for very little.
The reason I posed the question is I'm looking at it from the perspective of a commoner. So all I see is what's in the news, and there's only a handful of names that stick out to me of people that are really fighting for things that I'm concerned about. And frankly, with immigration, I mean, all you have to do is look at the legislative number, and you can see the legislators that came down and gave their take on it. And I don't think for the three different bills that Larry was there, I don't recall seeing a fellow legislator. So that's my litmus test. Now I don't know what goes into making the Kool-Aid down there, but I would think if you were a fighter and that was your issue, you'd weigh in the hearing.
I think that's a really important question. Why Speaker Gideon and the Democrats support keeping our doors wide open for people that are entering the country illegally. And I think, yes, I totally agree that they are looking at these newcomers as new voters. They need this large voting bloc. They're losing the black vote. They're losing the Hispanic vote. We've got Candace Owens out there working hard on the Brexit vote. You have Brandon Straka, who's out there working on the gay community, and you're losing a lot of the Hispanic. A lot of the conservative Hispanics are Catholic, and they don't like the abortion issue. So I think the Democrats realize they're losing a lot of votes. So that's one piece of it. I also know for a fact that there are a lot of nonprofit agencies that make a lot of money and have government contracts. So you've got Catholic Charities, Lutheran Services, a bunch of other groups that are actually getting contracts from the government, and they're making money off of providing the services to people, whether it be legal services to help them apply for asylum or teach them to speak English or provide health care to them. And then of course you have the whole school system too. These are a big head count when their kids get into the school system, and we've got a declining birth rate in the state of Maine. We're the oldest state in the union, and we've lost a tremendous amount of students. I mean, from the 1970s, we had 250,000 students, and that was K through 12. And now, including the preschool students, which is now down to age 4 in the state of Maine. So preschool through grade 12, we're down to 170,000 students. So we've lost a huge chunk of kids, and the schools like the head count. There are a lot of different people here that are pushing hard to bring as many people in as possible, not only for the voting factors, but the money and the contracts that go along with all these various agencies and services that are all on the take. I think there are a lot of reasons why they're keeping that door wide open. They're not concerned at all about the rule of law. They're not concerned about Mainers taking the back seat. They're not concerned that we have wait lists for cognitively and physically disabled individuals in Maine, and we've had those wait lists for a long time. They're not concerned about elderly Mainers being kicked out of nursing homes. They're not concerned about our housing shortage and the gentleman who just froze to death and was on a wait list to get housing here in the state of Maine. This is unconscionable, and the media is not going to play these stories up and get these facts out to the public, and yet they are all right there. And I think that social media is helping to spread that word, and a lot of Mainers are very angry about the illegal immigration and Mainers coming last. They just don't know how to channel it or what to do with it.
The homeless guy who froze to death, sleeping outdoors in a sleeping bag, he'd been on a wait list for quite a while and froze to death waiting. And it has provoked a lot of outrage on social media because people see the asylum seekers, so-called. I don't even like to call them asylum seekers. People who broke into the country, entered illegally, and the Janet Mills and the rest of the state government bending over backwards to help them out, and we got our own people freezing to death on the streets.
And I think that when you're looking at why Republicans and Democrats, both sides of the aisle, seem to appear to have a lack of concern, part of it is this whole notion that you're somehow racist or bigoted, uncaring, cold-hearted. If you can't look at some of those pictures of children at the border and welcome them. And so politicians don't like to be labeled like that, and they're very hesitant to have their face juxtaposed next to those faces, because they know that's what the media will do. They know that's what the Democrat independent expenditure mailers are going to show. And we need to be better about showing the people on the wait list, the Mainers that have been waiting. And I think that we just need to have a bigger voice to make sure that Mainers do see that we do care, and we care a lot about very vulnerable populations here in the state of Maine. And there's no reason that people that broke into the country illegally should be going to the front of the line. That is absolutely infuriating to someone like my mother, who is a naturalized citizen. I'm a first-generation American. She is really not happy to see that she had to wait 7 years, came through the system legally, married my dad, an American citizen, and she couldn't jump to the front of the line. And why are people that wait across the Rio Grande River, make their way to San Antonio, get shipped, put on a bus, their bus ticket paid for by Catholic Charities, shipped up to Portland, Maine, get off the bus, and then jump to the front of the line while Mainers are freezing to death waiting for housing? It is not fair. It's not right. And I know a lot of people that are not happy about that.
Yeah, well said.
All right, Zach, you got cleanup.
Well, following these two is kind of tough, but I'll try. I think it's threefold, and I'm going to kind of reiterate some of the things that both Larry and Heather have said. Yes, the Democrat Party is definitely, and the left is looking for a new voting bloc because they are losing their traditional voting blocs. And that's why they're allying themselves with the Islamic community. That's why they're also very much in favor of giving, these people benefits as well. And the more that the African American population and the more that the Hispanic, population that has already been here for a while are now tending to become more middle class, having their own income and kind of starting businesses. And that isn't their demographic. So now they have to start and get a new demographic. So that's where this huge influx of illegal immigrants are coming from in that benefit. I also agree with Heather that yes, especially in Maine Catholic Charities and other not so-called non-profit organizations are profiting off of this, and it's a big business. So there is that aspect. Where I think there's another aspect that hasn't been touched, though, in this conversation, and that is that the left doesn't only want a solid voting bloc. They need to change the culture of the United States. They need to fracture very fabric of what this country is all about. And we can go into all these other issues, but to stick to this one, I'm sure, Heather, you can attest to this as well. I am a first-generation American as well. And my mother is an American. She's from Russia, but she considers herself an American. When you ask her, what are you? She says she's American. And then people usually ask, oh, well, where's the accent from? Oh, I'm from Russia. But her first inclination is she's an American. I think, a lot of what the left does is they're trying to change the culture, because if they can change the culture, they can make it into a socialistic, communistic country. That's their end goal. So by fracturing the country and creating smaller groups where people say, oh, I'm African American, not I'm an American, or I'm Mexican American, instead of just being an American first, is one of the goals of illegal immigration as well, because people that have come here legally, they go through the steps, and by going through those steps, they're working hard to come here. So they appreciate it more, instead of just cutting a line where those people don't appreciate it. And they still think of themselves as where they're from, not, from the United States. So there is that aspect as well, which I think is one of the big reasons that they're for illegal immigration as well.
I would like to say something to segue off of Zach.
Sure.
A friend of mine became a naturalized citizen about 4 or 5 years ago. She had been in the process for a long time. It's a complicated, long story. But the bottom line is it was a very emotional and a beautiful ceremony down at the Portland City Hall. And when she arrived, she had to fill out some paperwork. And there was a woman, I'll back up, we had to study. There were questions, and I would go over to her house almost every night for about a month and quiz her on her questions, so that when she did her interview, she would know and not be so nervous, and she'd know the answers, and she was very well prepared, and she did a great job. And so there's a lot of prep work. And she went into the interview, she passed the exam, and we show up at the city hall to do the ceremony. And there was a woman there who was from Asia, I don't know what country, and she had to fill out some paperwork as well. And this woman could not speak one word of English. I mean, not one word. She hands the pen to my friend and kind of motions, and my friend says, "You want me to fill out your paperwork?" And she just nods her head. And I said, I intervened and said, "No, you fill out your own paperwork." And so my friend filled out her paperwork, and this woman had no idea how to even spell her own name. Her name and her address was on the envelope that this form had come in. And I said to her, "Your name goes here," and I pointed from the envelope there, and she literally had to, every letter, flip the envelope from one side to the other, back and forth, to even know how to spell her name. She finally filled out the paperwork, and there were about 35 or 40 people in the ceremony. And after we got all done with this ceremony, my friend, and we all went out to lunch, and my friend said she was really surprised that someone who couldn't speak any English at all was able to be a naturalized citizen when she had to study and answer questions and prove that she could speak English. How could this possibly be? And then she said when they took the oath, she said the people around her weren't even repeating the oath. They all had their hands in the air, but they weren't repeating after they sort of a line by line type of oath. And she said there were people from Canada, there were people that spoke English around her, but they were not verbally vocalizing the oath. And she was very dismayed to see the lack of respect to repeat the oath, and also this just really puzzling situation where people that didn't speak English at all, there's no way they could have passed any sort of an interview or exam. So breaking the culture, these people, they certainly don't seem to feel like they're Americans that come from another country. They feel like they are African Americans first, or whatever country they're from, I guess, first, Canadian American, you name it. They're not Americans from another country. They are, the other country seems to be first.
Right. And it wasn't that way.
It wasn't that way, not for my mother. She's very proud to be an American. She loves America.
How recently was this, Heather?
5 years ago, I'm going to guess.
It is interesting because the media, whenever there's a naturalization ceremony in Bangor or in Portland, it's a celebratory event for the media, this mosaic that's coming together. But I kind of suspected that there wasn't all it appeared to be, and that, what you're saying kind of confirms that.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about leftists and diversity, yeah, in a lot of cases, diversity can be a very good thing if there is a central unifying goal that everyone there believes in the same thing, different ideas, right?
Yeah, your allegiance is to the Constitution.
Exactly. But when you pervert that, yeah, diversity is good. Not only different ideas and different cultures, sure, but that is more paramount, and you belong to your own clan versus another clan. That separates what the country actually is all about. It's no longer a melting pot. It's a bunch of BBs in a can. Instead of melting all the BBs together, they're just little specks in a can. They're not conforming together.
In revisiting this stuff today and trying to splice some audio together for the first part of the introduction, I went back to the June broadcast when Mayor Ethan Strimling was on WVOM, and he was essentially begging for, telling us that everybody has to step up and do their part. And then several days later, the Chief Border Patrol agent Jason Owens was on with Howie Carr, and he tells us that everybody that just came into that Del Rio, was it the Del Rio sector or whatever, everybody that was just admitted, they're all illegals. So for several decades, we've known that Portland has been a sanctuary city. We call it a harboring haven. So in short order, I think, and I can't remember the exact time frame, but it certainly was within less than a month, the system, they facilitated chaos in mere days. They bring them to a city that's already short on housing. There's already property taxes are going through the roof. They're overflowing with the homeless shelter. And in mere days, from the initial onset of traffic coming to Portland, Strimling's on the radio saying everybody else has to step up. Well,
and it goes to something we've talked about before, is the complicity of the fake news media in this, not reporting the facts, and to actually being dishonest about the immigration status of these newcomers, to present that guy who spent, the political science professor from the Congo, who left the Congo and went to Brazil and spent 2.5 years in Brazil, got married and had a daughter, and then proceeded to come to Maine. That guy's not an asylum seeker by anybody's definition of asylum seeker. If you're seeking asylum, you stop in the first country where you're not in fear for your life. So, but again, the media is presenting all of these people as victims. And then, of course, one of the ways they bully and intimidate legislators and others is to label you a white nationalist, a white supremacist, a bigot, whatever other nasty slur they can apply to you. And as we've noted, most legislators are loath to get labeled like that.
It's a sham. That's what's going on. It's a sham, and the left, they're trying to change the country in any way they can to support their ends. So it really is any means necessary.
I didn't buy onto this multicultural experiment that they're having. I just want to raise a family and be left alone. And I think most of my neighbors are just like me. Not that I don't have any compassion for the Congolese and the Somalis, but I don't think, well, it's not me. It's just the welfare state, and as I think it was you that brought this up in a column, Larry, the welfare state and open borders is, they just don't mix, or maybe that was Walter Williams.
But no, Maine taxpayers, the way I put it, have absolutely no moral or legal obligation to provide anything to a non-citizen, period. Right. End of story. Even if we had a surplus of revenue in Augusta, that's an area for private charities and churches, and there's plenty of that going on to assist refugees outside the country. But this idea that they enter the country illegally and then somehow we have some moral obligation to take care of them. Again, when we've got lifelong Mainers on wait list. Heather, what was the figure? There's like 18,000 people on this housing wait list. I forget what the number is. It's just absurd.
19,000 was the most recent report, and there are 1,800 the cognitively and physically disabled wait list. And we've got a nursing home issue. We've got an assisted living issue. We have a lot of needs for vulnerable populations here in the state of Maine that should be coming first. And you're right, we have no obligation to these folks. And we have people that would like to move to the state of Maine. For instance, a couple that I met from South Africa. They're white farmers. Their lives are in danger. They would love to move here. They're college educated. They're professionals. They speak English. And yet they were recently told that they would have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to move here. And they're ready to hit the ground running and work immediately. And for some reason we seem to block legal immigration of people who really could contribute to Maine and not be a burden on any level. And then we turn around and do backflips to help people that need tremendous services, have tremendous health care needs, don't have the education, and you may be trained for some sort of a job in a third world country, but the training you're receiving is I'm sorry, it's just not the same. It doesn't transfer. And so there are a lot of roadblocks to trying to bring in people from a totally different culture, not only their culture, their education, their, as I said, their medical care is substandard, and they oftentimes bring diseases and have healthcare needs. There are just a lot of factors here, and we seem to be trying to integrate or bring into the Maine economy, if we're looking for ways to help with our workforce shortage. The people that we're bringing that would like to come here, we're not bringing in, that actually would be able to help with our workforce shortage. And yet we're bringing other people in that really are not able to easily help with our workforce problems. And it's kind of funny, the left likes to talk about how highly educated these doctors, lawyers, engineers are from these other countries. And if that's the case, a lot of the jobs that we have that are not being filled tend to be lower income, hard labor type jobs. And they're not interested in filling those positions. So, we've got a problem there with meeting workforce shortage issues with, like, for instance, Representative Beth O'Connor works at a hotel, and she was talking about how they had to close off 20% of the rooms. They had plenty of customers to fill every single room. The tourism industry is gangbusters in southern Maine, but they couldn't find enough staff to clean the rooms. So, I don't see someone who's from a country that was a doctor in another country being excited about going to clean hotel rooms. And that is definitely an area where we have tremendous shortage. And I know that a bunch of restaurants have had to either cut back hours, close early during the summer season. They don't have enough staff to work the kitchen.
Well, I would say this, Heather, as well. I don't fully believe the left that all these people are highly educated. I think they cherry pick a couple of these people as the poster children, as these are the example of all these people. What's really going on is these people are coming here illegally. They have no loyalty or a semblance of gumption to do anything in this country as people that would legally come here have. And that's exactly what the left wants. They want people to sit and do nothing and just rely on the government.